Every single breath you take is sending a message to your brain before every thought and every action. It's telling your nervous system whether you're safe or under threat. In this conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Ela Manga, a medical doctor, to explore the way we breathe, often unconsciously, keeps us locked in a state of stress, and how trying to override stress is where we go wrong in our systems of health.
The breath is a language. If we're feeling anxious, there's energy in the system. Anxiety is the visceral experience and the physiological experience of adrenaline in my system. Adrenaline is designed by it to move us, to run away or to fight. Now there's adrenaline in the system, but now we're pulling ourselves in the opposite direction. What happens to that adrenaline?
Ela is rebuilding a lost paradigm of health, one that starts by working with the nervous system through the most direct mechanism we have, the breath. Her work in conscious breathing is changing how people understand burnout, anxiety, addiction, and healing, not as something to fight, but something to regulate from the inside out.
So breath is less of a vertical movement, which actually puts a lot of strain on the body. It's more of a pulse. And then the whole body breathes. And that is the pattern of breath that we are seeking to return to, because that way of breathing is reflective of our most natural state of peace and freedom.
Dr. Manga, if we were to put one of your patients mid-burnout in a brain scanner, and then again 10 minutes into your prescribed breathing sequence, what would we see change and why?
That's such an interesting question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because every technique or every way that we breathe has a different effect on the body and the brain and the nervous system. Our breath is unconscious,
right,
and conscious. The part of the brain that regulates our unconscious breathing has been identified in the respiratory center in the brainstem. It's called the pre-Botzinger complex.
Okay,
right?
pre-Botzinger.
The pre-Botzinger complex.
And it's in the brainstem.
It's in the brainstem. And this has been identified by Jack Feldman.
Okay.
And so it has been shown that before every inhalation, there's a coordination of the nerve cells. And this is what initiates an inhalation, unconscious inhalation. As soon as we bring our attention to the breath, and when we start to pace the breath, another area that is very close to the pre-Botzinger complex starts to come online, and that is called the locus ceruleus.
Okay, so there's one part which is like just automatic, right?
Yes.
I'm just dumbing it down for myself. And then there's another part that comes online when we are becoming conscious of it.
Yes, which means that we are wired to engage with our breath consciously. Our nervous system has adapted for us to consciously breathe, which is so fascinating.
And what would be the purpose of that?
Well, that is the question. Why have we adapted our nervous system to work with our breath consciously?
Yes.
It's part of our evolution of our consciousness, I believe. So when we consciously change the way that we breathe, a neural pathway starts to light up between this locus ceruleus and our emotional centers. It's part of the ancient brain that processes emotion.
Right.
And memory.
Right.
So when we're in a state of fight-flight, that we often are when we're in burnout, then it is this part of the brain that is quite active, overactive. And the amygdala is the panic button of the brain. So we're constantly receiving signals from our internal environment and external environment that this is a dangerous situation. And so that panic button sends messages down to the adrenal glands, releases adrenaline and cortisol, and that changes the way that we breathe unconsciously. Now, the breath is a language. So when we start to breathe in that way, the brain is receiving a message, I'm fight-flight. I'm in flight now. And so goes a vicious cycle. When we receive the message that we're in fight-flight, our breathing changes.
And do you think that this is like the primary signal that the brain gets is from the breath?
It's one of the messages. So we are receiving information from so many parts of the body.
Right.
Okay. So our breath sends information via the vagus nerve to the brain. So there's so much information that the body is receiving constantly.
Yeah.
Muscle tension, what's happening on a chemical level. All of that information is constantly being sent from our body's interoceptors through the vagus nerve to the brain, and the brain then interprets it. So when we're in a state of fight-flight, as I mentioned, the amygdala and the limbic brain is quite active at the expense of the part of the brain that regulates attention, memory, empathy, higher cognitive functions. And so we see that when someone is in burnout, it impacts memory, it impacts concentration, it impacts our ability to connect. So when we breathe consciously, information is being sent via the locus coeruleus that now we're engaging with our breath consciously. That dampens the activity of the amygdala.
So less fight or flight?
Less fight or flight. And the higher functioning parts of the brain start to come online. The insula, that's another part of the brain that interprets signals from the body, but also the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for attention, for focus, for empathy.
Would we then start seeing a change in like the neurotransmitters in the brain? Could you talk a little bit about what effect that would have? Like what would somebody in burnout typically have? Like what kind of neurotransmitters would be dominating their brain or like neural chemicals? And then what kind of change would we see once they are more relaxed, like less in a stressed or anxious state?
Well, I think, when we are in that fight-flight, our brain is so wired to receive the chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones, the stress chemicals. And that impacts the levels of acetylcholine, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Those levels start to get impacted. It's interesting that our mind is not just in the brain, but in the whole body. And a lot of the mind resides within the cell membrane. The cell membrane in every single part of the body has its own intelligence. So if it is receiving big doses of adrenaline and cortisol, what happens is more receptors on the surface of those cells start to come online, which means it's needing more adrenaline and cortisol. And so what happens is that we become addicted to our own stress chemicals.
So how does that translate to an addiction? Because now we're using up all these chemicals and then we're using up all the acetylcholine. And now we need more cortisol so that we get more acetylcholine?
Yeah. And so we're unconsciously drawn to the ways of thinking, the ways of being, the kinds of exercise that will activate that kind of stress response. And that's why people who are experiencing burnout are even more drawn to high impact exercise because they feel better.
I can relate to this so much. Oh my God, it's making so much sense. Like, it's just like you feel alive.
We feel alive, yes.
It's because you've associated feeling alive with this feeling of being stressed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens is this puts a great deal of strain on the adrenal glands, which are constantly needing to push out these stress chemicals.
So the adrenal glands are like sit on top of the kidneys and they produce?
That's right. Cortisol and adrenaline amongst other hormones as well.
Okay.
So we burnt out. The adrenal glands already taking strain, but we're pushing them so hard. And so driving burnout even deeper.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So that's what happens over time, right? What's really incredible about the human nervous system is its capacity to create new neural pathways. And we are designed for this. So like anything, the more attention we pay to something, the more we make conscious breathing part of our lives, the more we exercise in a certain way that is embodied and present, the more we make choices for our lives, those neural pathways start to knit. The more we practice something, the more those neural pathways start to knit, and eventually that becomes a new way of being. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes perseverance. And in our quick fix world, we want immediate results. And so this approach becomes even more challenging. And so we're drawn towards the practices that give us that high, not realizing that actually we're setting up just another form of addiction.
I want to ask you a bit more about burnout. So I've seen you talk a bit about the different types of fight or flight, or like the different, like fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And not everyone who's living in our current, present, modern world is experiencing the same or similar things maybe, but not the same kind of burnout.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important because fight flight is often spoken about in relation to burnout, that we're in the fight flight for we're in fight flight for a long period of time, and that eventually leads to burnout. In many cases, that is true. However, we also have another stress response, especially when stress is overwhelming. If the situation is too overwhelming, we tend to go into a freeze response.
Right.
And that response is protective. So it's almost as if we are needing to play dead in order to stay alive.
Wow.
And so there's a whole shutdown response. And so we tend to collapse inwards. We tend to want to make ourselves invisible. That's what it looks like in our lived experience. We tend to procrastinate. We disconnect from the sources of support around us and within us. We tend to dissociate from the body.
And then we scroll.
We scroll. Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Well, for many reasons. I think it's a way to release dopamine.
Right.
So we get dopamine hits, we know that, which makes us feel temporarily better. We also, it's a way to distract ourselves from what we're feeling and what we're thinking, which is not easy often to face because we don't have ways to relate to it. So just by turning towards how we're feeling, which is so overwhelming often, it's an incredibly scary experience. And so we haven't developed the capacity to hold the intensity of our human experience on the planet currently. It just feels like too much.
Yeah, you're right. And I think your journey is fascinating, that as a medical doctor,
you are exploring like this very empowering way of healing. And I want to understand a bit about how did you get here? What was that point where you realized that, okay, conventional medicine doesn't have all the answers? I'm sure it wasn't one point. Maybe it was a period in your life. And then how did you move from that to what you're doing currently, which is helping people heal through their own breath?
I had the privilege of working as a GP in my early career. And I say it's a privilege because I came from the hospital system where the way that we engage with patients is really fast and we have to get through a queue of people. Doctors are tired, patients are tired, and the whole system, ironically, can be quite dehumanized. And so when I went into GP practice, I had more space and time with my patients. And I started to listen differently. And I realized that there was so much more to the story of this human being who was sitting in front of me than just the symptoms that they were describing. There was so much more in what they were not saying. And I started to see very clear patterns between what people were experiencing on an emotional level and how their bodies were responding to that. How their bodies were responding to their emotional life and their belief systems, conscious and unconscious. And so the more I started to see patterns emerge, the more I realized that the way that I had been trained was quite one-dimensional, that I was not equipped with the tools and the practices to support a more sustainable way of being that really supported not just health, but healing as a ongoing, continuous process. It's not like we're working towards an endpoint of, oh, I'm healthy now. Because we are constantly being influenced by our environment and by our lifestyle and by what we eat. And the body is constantly changing and responding. You know, I'm going through perimenopause at the moment. My body is doing all kinds of things. It's not the same body that it was 10 years ago. And so I'm needing to respond to that. And so I started to think about how can I participate in a co-creation of health with my patient that is not hierarchical, but that is really collaborative. At that point, I was not conscious of breath being that important. Yes, I was practicing breath work as part of my personal yoga practice. But at that point, as a young GP thinking about practicing medicine differently, it was absolutely not something that I had considered. I began my journey practicing differently by studying a modality called body talk, which is a form of energy medicine that really appealed to me because it did bring in the science and the anatomy and physiology. It was created by a chiropractor, John Veltheim. And that was my first entry point into practicing health differently, which was really an important step because it filled some gaps for me. It really helped me to understand these connections between our symptoms and so many other factors, from genetic factors to environmental factors to factors we don't even consider. The place we were born, where we're living, how that impacts our energy fields. It is just so mind-blowing. And so when I started to practice that way, I just could not practice Western medicine anymore. So I sold my GP practice and moved to a wellness center just outside Johannesburg. And with my friend Marisa, who was a social worker and whose family owned this beautiful property, we started to experiment with different ways of supporting people's health and creating multidimensional programs, bringing in yoga, bringing in massage therapy, counseling, body talk, nutrition. And we started to create these 12-week programs. And it was incredible because it was then that I started to work with people with burnout, with addictions, and really started to think about this idea of what burnout is, what energy management is. And it was in that time, this was in 2011, that I experienced my first conscious connected breathing session. We were experimenting with all kinds of modalities then, trying out all kinds of yoga. It was such a heady time. It was really wonderful. When I had this experience of an expanded state, I was just completely blown away. This felt like the missing piece that wove together everything that I had been studying and practicing and learning about. Here was a practice, not even a practice, an experience that is always there, that we take for granted. And yet this is possible to feel this way by just learning to work with it differently, by breathing differently. And even by that stage, I had started to question the paradigm of integrative medicine and felt even frustrated with that idea because integrative medicine is not accessible to most people.
Why?
It involves doing blood tests. It involves a whole, doctors prescribing so many supplements. It's expensive.
Yeah.
In a country where most people don't have access to basic healthcare, How does one offer this idea of holistic well-being? Well, what we take most for granted. And that excited me. But I also realized that it is really important and empowering to understand the how and the why behind it. And I think with many healing modalities, it feels esoteric, it feels ungrounded, and it just requires a trust.
I want to ask you, did you experience like judgment from other doctors, medical professionals, like people that knew you? Did they judge you for kind of leaving behind your well scientifically grounded GP practice and then moving to like holistic wellness?
I'm not aware of the greater medical world and other colleagues. I mean, they wouldn't have spoken to me directly about the way they felt. I'm sure they questioned what I was doing. But what I was aware of was how my family was experiencing it. I have medical professionals in my family, doctors in my family, brother who's a pharmacist, uncles who are doctors, and they just did not understand that my career path was taking me into something that anybody could practice versus going the specialization route. Now they understand, but it took 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why do you think that more doctors are not coming to the same realizations that you did? What do you think it is?
I think that any doctor, if they were truly honest with themselves, would know that we do not have all the answers. In admitting that, though, means that it has an impact on the patient. Mm-hmm. If the doctor is uncertain, that makes perhaps the patient feel unsafe. I think that there's also a habitual and historical arrogance in the medical profession, where everything is just based on the data. And we know that so much of the data is not accurate. One has to think about who is funding the research.
Right.
And what the greater agenda is.
100%. 100%.
Mm-hmm. And what is incredible to me is a true scientist who really delves deeply into the essence of their subject will find that the deeper they go, the more expansive it becomes.
Yes. Yes.
Touching the realm of what is unknowable.
There's always stuff. You can go deeper and deeper. It's always unknowable.
Because if we are to practice in this way, it means that we are going into the realm of that which can't be necessarily measured. But it also means that we have to go within.
So how do you know? Like, you have to connect with yourself to know whether you're really helping someone. That's so hard.
It is hard. But this is something that I feel strongly about with regards to the medical professional and the responsibility we have. And it's the importance of asking ourselves the question, what is the place from which we are holding space for another? What is the place within ourselves? And if we do not commit to that process of continuous self-awareness and growth and living in alignment with what we're sharing, I think our work is not going to have the kind of impact that we desire.
I think it's also hard to, once you've spent 7 years studying or however long it takes for a doctor to qualify, it's really hard to admit that maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Maybe I can't help people in the way that I hope to help people. Maybe there are things that are going terribly wrong and I don't have the answers. And it's almost like invalidating a part of you that you've become so attached, like your identity, like my identity as a doctor, healer.
Absolutely. And I have absolute empathy for that because I experienced it.
Oh.
I experienced it. I'm just fortunate that I experienced it quite early on in my career. So there was less undoing. There was still a major process of undoing. And in fact, it hasn't ended.
Yeah.
You know, I'm at this point in my career now where I'm questioning whether I should continue keeping my registration as a medical doctor or not.
Wow.
You know, so it's a debate, and I notice the tendency for me to want to hold on to it because it is still part of my identity.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's feeling out of alignment with my evolving identity. So this is an interesting place that I find myself. And I think it is important to recognize that, yes, we all have labels and we all have roles, and it's necessary to operate in this world. You know, we have been born into constructs. From the moment that we were born, we've given labels, and then we are raised within these systems. And so it becomes very much a way of being. And then to arrive at a point where you realize, oh, hang on, this is not quite working for me anymore. How do we start to unravel that? Because what are we even working towards? What does it mean if I give this up? Then what? Because the future is uncertain. But I think that we forget that the future is what we are part of creating.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful and empowering. Thank you for saying that. I noticed that in myself. I noticed that in the people around me. I think like also going back to burnout now, a lot of people experiencing burnout are part of that system, right? And then maybe by the time they've hit a stage where they're burning out, it's kind of a bit too late because I'm part of the system and I had a vision for the rest of my life. Except my experience of that trajectory that I'm on is not what I thought it would be. And I think it takes a lot of courage to question that and to like switch or to make that change. But I also see more and more people doing that. Like the Gen Zs now, they're totally like not into like hustle culture, so out and not into that. Like that's just not going to work. Why are we hustling? Actually, why are we hustling? Ultimately, we start hustling only to go back home, go to bed, maybe have a weekend with our family. If we have a husband or kids or whatever, friends or parents or whoever, we have only the weekends with them and we're so tired on the weekend and we're trying to fit everything in. And really like, what is the point of giving the best hours of our day and the best years of our life to hustle because it's going to give us something within, but often we find that it doesn't do that. So I think, yeah, I'm feeling positive that more people are questioning this.
Absolutely.
You deal with people a lot who experience burnout, but also I want to go into addictions.
At the same time.
All at the same time. All at the same time. Yes. All at the same time. Yes. So I was like, okay, I'm going to reset my dopamine pathways. And then like, these were like really, this is very, very recent. Okay. Like I would say just a few weeks ago. And then I was just like experiencing, I just didn't know what to do with
withdrawal. You're experiencing withdrawal.
Yes, it's withdrawal. You're right. So I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know I'm eating like so clean and healthy. I feel terrible. I feel really bad. And I'm feeling stressed out. I'm feeling more stressed out. Yeah. So then I looked up on YouTube and I found a famous channel that's Breathwork Is Not. And there's some like breathwork practices to increase dopamine. And I tried doing that and it was good for like maybe an hour. And then I was feeling really crappy again. What's your approach to dealing with addictions? And yeah, just if you can explain how this whole dopamine thing works and how we could use breath. And what do you think happened where that breathwork practice didn't really work for me for too long? Yeah.
So before I answer the question about addiction specifically, I'd like to just mention something that I think is really important. And this is something that I have realized and it has shaped the way I practice breathwork or teach breathwork. So it's fascinating how we can use something like breathwork that we would like to use to heal or grow.
Yes.
In the same way that we do everything else. So, for example, we have a headache, we want to take a headache pill. We have hypertension, we want to take an antihypertensive. That same mindset feeds into the way we relate to breathwork. So we tend to want to use a particular technique for a thing. If I feel this, I want to do this practice. If I feel anxious, then I want to do a practice that's going to bring anxiety down. If I feel tired, I want to use a practice that brings energy up. Okay.
Guilty.
Well, not guilty, just I'm aware.
Yes.
We're aware.
Yes.
We're aware.
Yes.
Guilt is a useless emotion.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you for.
We are all experiencing the same things.
Yeah.
I know because I experience it in myself. And so what I have come to realize is how the body is constantly communicating to us.
Okay.
If we're feeling anxious, there's energy in the system. Anxiety is the visceral experience and the physiological experience of adrenaline in my system. Adrenaline is designed, wired to move us. It's designed so that we can take action, to run away or to fight. Okay? And so now there's adrenaline in the system, but now we're pulling ourselves in the opposite direction. What happens to that adrenaline? It's still in the system.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we recognize that, okay, I'm experiencing the sensations that I associate with anxiety, and I understand physiologically what's happening, then I can use a practice that is going to move my body in that direction to discharge that energy. And once that energy has been discharged, then my nervous system returns to its baseline relaxed state. So rather than doing a calming practice when I'm experiencing anxiety, I do an energizing embodied practice that gets my body to move. If I'm feeling really tired, okay, sometimes it's not possible for me to lie down and do a body scan, but I can recognize I'm tired. My body's seeking rest. Rather than trying to override that by doing a practice that's going to boost my energy or boost my dopamine, I'm going to recognize that right now, my body is seeking rest. And if I just recognize that and lie on my bed for 5 minutes and just slow down my breathing or I do a little body scan, okay, now I've given my body what it needs, and there's a natural rise of energy that gets me to get on with my day.
This is really like crazy paradigm shift for me. Like, yes, of course. Why did I think otherwise? Because I do that. You know, when I'm struggling to regulate myself, or I'm feeling like anxious about all the things I need to do, or if I'm experiencing withdrawal because I've now taken away all my dopamine from my life, I'm like, okay, I think I should do some 4-7-8 breathing because it's going to calm me
right
down. I should just and it works, it works. And maybe that's why it just works for like an hour or like 10 minutes. That makes so much sense. So,
well, I think the first thing is to recognize what's happening in my body. Where am I feeling that sensation?
Yeah.
Okay. So where am I experiencing tiredness? Where am I experiencing tension? So to get really good at naming and feeling and sensing, what is my body communicating? Right? Using then the breath as a bridge. So what I mean by that is bringing consciousness to where that story is living in my body or where that habit of tension is, and almost giving permission for that place to breathe.
Okay. It's intentional.
So it's intentional, and I'm directing breath towards it. And perhaps if there's anxiety, I can just do a few energizing breaths, maybe even some movement to move energy out of my system, and then enjoy a natural calm that follows.
And so that's how you would treat somebody who is, or that's what you would prescribe to someone who's maybe trying to get off their dopamine seeking.
Yeah. Yes. To realize that actually the feeling that we seek, we can achieve without the external substance.
And maybe what's happening is that as we take away our drugs of choice, whether it's scrolling or whatever, as we take away our drugs of choice, the anxiety is just our body's maybe pent up needs. So the body has like this pent up anxiety that it wants to express. And so if we allow the body to express that, then the anxiety will go away rather than try to suppress it with like a 7-8 breathing practice.
I just want to talk about anxiety a little bit.
Yes.
Because for me, it's an umbrella term for a lot of, it's like a soup of emotion.
Yes.
That has not been named and expressed. Anxiety in itself is not a pure emotion. Sadness, fear, anger, joy, these are core emotions that we are wired for, that our brain recognizes that there are certain specific chemicals related to each of these emotions, right? And so when we can start to tease out what we're really feeling, make space for that, feel that, then it gives a natural expression to this emotion, which is actually energy in motion. If you look at the word emotions, energy in motion, our bodies are designed to move that energy in a particular way. So anger is a very forward moving, forward directing emotion. It gives us the energy to take action. Okay, fear can be quite protective. It supports us to create more boundaries, just to pause a little, to watch. Sadness takes us deep. It carves into our hearts so that we have more capacity for love, for compassion, for connection. Joy is expressive. The whole body comes alive,
It's a feeling of expansiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And grief, too. Grief is a surrendering emotion. It's so incapacitating that we have no choice but to surrender to something. And it's the closest that we can get to grace. And so if we can really start to build our capacity to name and map these feelings in our body, and we name them and make space for expressing them in the way that they seek, in the way that they naturally are designed, then anxiety becomes less of an experience.
So if you were to just help me or guide me through a practice that I could use to identify what the actual emotions are in my body, and then help those emotions express themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it might not be necessary to name exactly what the emotion is. For this exercise, it's more important to feel the sensation. Okay. So the invitation now is just to come to ground before we do any particular practice. And just the act of placing your feet on the floor or to lift them up on the seat.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay. So just finding a seat that feels comfortable for you. And for now, just allowing yourself to receive the support of the chair underneath you. Just exhaling into that. We're going to be doing just 3 grounding breaths. So that is a double inhalation through the nostrils, nice and slow. Inhale once, inhale twice. Follow on with a slow exhalation through the mouth. Another one just like this, lengthening the spine with a double inhale, nice and slow and soft. Exhale as you soften out the shoulders and the back of the neck. And just one more like this. Inhale once, inhale twice. Slow exhalation through the nostrils. Now allowing the breath just to rest. And for now, just listening, feeling the natural rise and fall, the inhale and exhale breathing you. And as you start to become alive to the sensations of breath, we can start to notice what's here today. And so all of you is welcome. allowing the thoughts to pass through, allowing the feelings to rise up, and sensing. The breath becomes our inner eyes to scan, to sense. Where is our body holding a pattern of tension? Just notice. Perhaps it's at the back of the neck. That's often where we store tension. Perhaps it's in the jaw, so release the jaw a little. Let the shoulders drop down. Once again, returning to breath as inner eyes. And as you start to come alive to the sensations of breath, you're also starting to come alive to the other sensations, perhaps in the throat, the belly. What part of the body feels most alive right now? Is there a part that feels a little restrictive? Is there a part of your body that feels more stagnant? Where does tension live? Where does resistance live? Just scanning. Now, can you locate the part of the body that feels most alive, that you're most aware of? And can you direct your breath and your attention towards the sensation? So that breath becomes a current that meets the sensation, that meets the edge. Without trying to break it down, the breath is gently holding and carrying the sensation with understanding and compassion and acknowledgement for this body and what it is holding. And that's all. Allowing the breath just to be the holding space for whatever is here. At the center of your breath shifts to sit just underneath this sensation. And can you feel whatever you've been holding here starting to soften, that the edges are starting to soften as it just trusts this holding space of the breath? And then perhaps you can feel this area itself is starting to breathe. Now relax your breath and just notice, how are you experiencing the sensation now? Is there another part of the body that is inviting your attention? Just closing with this practice with curiosity. Gently return to the feeling of the support beneath you, your seat. Gently returning, soft eyes, allowing the light in.
Fascinating. I didn't even realize that I was anxious until we started doing this. And then what I noticed is that first it started out in my chest. And then as that softened, it moved to my back.
Right.
And then I started noticing like I had this twitching. Like stuff just started twitching in my neck. Maybe I was holding a lot of tension there and it's just releasing or something.
Yeah, yeah. So unconsciously, your bodies are just carrying so much. You know, just the fact that you are here in a studio, we have lights. You know, what is your body holding unconsciously? And then just giving yourself permission just to turn towards it, to notice with the breath. Nothing much is needed.
I mean, yeah, that was so interesting because normally I would do like maybe a 4-7-8 breathing practice or something that's like prescribed for anxiety, as you said. But this was so fascinating because we didn't do any of that. I just like literally breathed into whatever I noticed. So Ela, that was wonderful. It's really like shifted my state. I don't know if you can feel that.
I can.
You can. Yeah. Like I feel it. Yeah. I feel like it's shifted the energy between us. Thank you. Yeah. This like leads me to think about other things that people are dealing with. So we talked about addictions, anxiety. What about like hormonal imbalances? A lot of women especially are dealing with hormonal imbalances. Do you think that, I know that if we are able to manage our, what we call anxiety better, then things might balance out. But I want to talk very specifically to you about the neurobiology or even just the biology of how we could use breathing or like our awareness of our breathing to balance out bodily functions like our hormones and immune system, things like that. Thyroid.
Yeah. I think it comes down to basic principles. And so when we can start to cultivate a deeper relationship with the breath and the body, and we begin to tone the nervous system or expand what we call that zone of tolerance, where there's a balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, we create an inner harmony and a resonance. We create the environment for the body's natural healing capacity to take place. I think there's a tendency to look at the diagnosis or the condition and to seek the practice that is going to target that specific thing. And again, you know, the invitation is to start to recognize and understand and appreciate that these symptoms are really the tip of the iceberg of the whole story of who we are, which includes our genetic inheritance. It includes our environment. It includes the food that we eat. It includes the state of our nervous system. To your point, directly, the breath immediately can have an impact on the state of our nervous system, which is what makes it so profound. But how is it that we are relating to the breath? So before we even go to techniques, it's important that we understand what we mean by functional breathing. So what do I mean by that? We all have a baseline breathing habit that reflects our inner state and reflects the story of our lives. So moment to moment, our breath is reflecting what we're feeling, what we're thinking, but also it reflects the story of our whole lives from the moment that we took our very first breath. Becomes imprinted within the nervous system and therefore in our baseline breathing pattern. There was a fascinating study that was released quite recently, in fact, where it was demonstrated that we all have a unique breath print. So just as we have a unique fingerprint, we also have a unique breath print that is unique to us, which tells the story of our lives. We are able to shift that. We are designed to engage with the breath consciously so that we are able to create a new foundation for our inner lives and the way that we relate to the world. So what does functional breathing mean? It means breathing in a way that our bodies have been designed. Firstly, breathing most of the time through the nose. Now, of course, we need to breathe through the mouth in certain situations. But we are meant to be breathing through the nostrils. The nose has 30 functions that have been identified. 30. And when I was writing Umoya, the Art and Science of Conscious Breathing, and I was doing research around this, I was blown away by the really fascinating architecture of the nose and all the functions that are related to smell and memory, to the function of our immune system, to the way that the breath slows down the way that we're engaging. It brings down our resting respiratory rate. So many of us are unconsciously breathing through the mouth for many reasons. The shape of our face has changed over the last few hundred years because of diet and so many other factors. COVID did so much for our habitual breathing. So wearing masks for, I don't know how long it was, a year, 2 years, it kind of drove us to unconsciously breathing through the mouth. So when we breathe through the mouth, it's sending messages to the brain, to the body that we're in fight flight. And so it feeds the vicious cycle. So just training ourselves to breathe through the nostrils once again already starts to shift something. Another aspect of functional breathing is breathing with the diaphragm. Now, I think many people get confused between belly breathing and diaphragmatic breathing. And often you'll hear breathwork practitioners say, or yoga practitioners say, breathe into your belly. That is not a natural way to breathe. Breathing into the belly does not make sense anatomically. Our breath begins with the diaphragm, which is the big dome-shaped muscle, flattening and contracting. The rib cage expands. We breathe into the back. There's a 3-dimensional expansion of the breath. And we are simply exaggerating that when we breathe consciously. Yes. And that takes the pressure off the neck and the shoulder muscles. So when we can learn to breathe with the diaphragm again, that is the natural breath. So breath is less of a vertical movement, which actually puts a lot of strain on the body. It's more of a pulse. And then the whole body breathes. And that is the pattern of breath that we are seeking to return to, because that way of breathing is reflective of our most natural state of peace and freedom.
Yeah, that's really, I can feel the difference there. What happens when we start doing that? Like, I want you to explain what most people are doing. You've watched a lot of people breathing, what most of us are doing all the time, versus belly breathing. I'm curious to know what happens when you breathe into the belly, because honestly, when I do some of the breathwork practices and I do breathe into my belly, it feels a bit stressful.
Yes, exactly. Because we're only engaging one part of the diaphragm,
okay,
the central part of the diaphragm. And it's almost, there's a pushing of the belly up. It's not necessarily diaphragmatic breathing. We're engaging abdominal muscles there.
Wow.
And that's why it feels more stressful. So the first thing that I do with people who come to see me for any medical condition is to re-establish healthy diaphragmatic breathing. It's a game changer. When we do that, our nervous system naturally finds a balance, and we already are creating the environment to support the body's innate healing, whatever that looks like. We can't always know what the root causes are.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can, and we can address them. Sometimes it's so complex. My suggestion is to start your day as soon as you become aware that you're awake. Okay? Start your day by turning towards the breath. So I always say, take 5 rather than take phone. Take just 5 conscious breaths before you reach for your phone.
Diaphragmatic breathing?
Or just noticing your breath.
Just become aware of it.
I heard something really beautiful the other day. What is the first thing you're aware of? Is it the in-breath or the out-breath? As soon as you wake up in the morning, are you aware of the in-breath or the out-breath?
I would say neither. I'm so unconscious.
So practice just becoming aware of the breath as soon as you're aware that you're awake.
And then just notice whether you first notice your in-breath or out-breath.
Or simply notice that you are breathing.
Yeah.
Be with it. Simply being with it, being present with it as a bridge between your sleep state and your sleep, as a bridge between your sleep state and your wake state. No, we jolt ourselves out of sleep. We reach for the phone, we look at emails, WhatsApp news, we jolted into the waking day. And our dream state is a very profound place. We are receiving messages, we are working through so much subconscious material. And so those first moments of waking is a very precious time. It's a threshold. And so practice just being with the breath in that moment. And then notice, okay, what's here today? Perhaps you're still with a dream that is lingering. Perhaps you're becoming aware of what your body is communicating to you. Perhaps there's a particular state of being that you're becoming aware of, a particular feeling, a thought pattern. Just being with that. And then your body will guide you around what it needs. Perhaps it really wants to move and it wants you to stretch. And then you can just get into your body and enjoy a few stretches and a few yawns. And just to start to move your spine in interesting ways, slowing down the breath and noticing. Perhaps then you want to just sit up in bed and slow down your breath 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Perhaps you feel like you'd like to do some alternate nostril breathing. So what's here today? So just getting curious. So you're creating a form for the flow of your breath and responding to what your body is asking for rather than a rigid prescribed regimen. Okay. So morning practice. And then you can add in whatever else you're doing. And then an evening practice. So what is your wind down? Perhaps the body is holding a lot of energy from the day and you want to do a few mouth breaths to move energy out of your system. I love the practice of Yoga Nidra, often called non-sleep deep rest, a body scan, just to really drop into the parasympathetic mode to prepare your body for sleep. You want to use a breathing practice that is slow and that starts to slow down your brain waves. Right? We want to slow down the brain waves from high beta state that we have during our day to alpha state. Okay, that will kind of guide us into a gentle restorative sleep. And then those are the bookends. Morning practice, evening practice. Perhaps in the afternoon when energy levels drop, you could do another body scan. And then during the day, that's the real practice of your breath. Right? So how can you engage with everything that you are doing and expressing and holding through the day, through your breath? What do I mean by that? So what do we do throughout the day? We're sitting at our desks, we're busy with emails. Can you, between your emails, just do a grounding breath? Grounding breath, double inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Andrew Huberman calls this a physiological sigh.
Yes.
I've adapted it slightly so that it's soft and slower. Okay, so just double inhale through the nose. And as you release the exhale, imagine that there's a softening at the back of your neck and your shoulders, and you're bringing your awareness right down to your feet. takes a few seconds. And then the next task. So we're not building up this adrenalized energy where we get to the end of the day and we need to crash. We are staying with it throughout the day.
And the diaphragmatic breathing, would we just, as soon as we remember, would we just become aware of it and try to change that?
Yeah. So when we're doing the grounding breath, become aware of that expansion of the diaphragm. Inhale once, inhale twice. Yeah.
Amazing.
Another example of how to weave the breath into your day. So you do a lot of speaking, you do a lot of listening. What's happening to your breath as you're listening to your guest? As something rises and you're feeling something in your body, can you receive it with a conscious, slow breath? Can you listen with your breath? When I speak, and because I've worked with breath and I work with breath so much, I have really become aware of the place from which I'm speaking, that I'm engaging the diaphragm as I'm speaking, that I'm pacing my voice, that my voice is an articulated, shaped exhalation.
Wow.
It changes the resonance of the voice, and it changes the way that the person who is receiving what you're saying is how it lands.
Yeah, it lands. Definitely. I think you're a great speaker because it lands. I want to learn this.
Well, you're doing it right now.
I'm doing it now. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So then just like going back to this question, right? So you're saying that, yes, you're right. We don't often know the root causes of, like, let's say, hormonal imbalances and immune system dysfunctions. But you would say a good place to start is the diaphragmatic breathing. And then would you like say, okay, do this for a month and let's just see what happens.
Absolutely.
Do this. Let's just see, like maybe things go away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a great foundation because it creates balance of your nervous system. And we know that our hormones are part of the autonomic nervous system. These are not separate systems.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Because they're all related, right? Like I guess I'm just thinking about the cortisol, adrenaline, and then its effects on, as women, estrogen, progesterone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
So when we create the foundations of functional breathing, we are deepening and cultivating our breath intelligence. Okay. We are learning to engage with the nervous system. We are participating with the nervous system, and we are very consciously creating the environment where the body's natural intelligence can support us. I have a teacher, one of my mentors and beloved teachers, Dr. Bernard Brom. He's the father of integrative medicine in South Africa. And I'll never forget one of his teachings is that we don't have to fill all the holes. We don't have to plug all the holes. So often when we are in a state of disharmony related to our health, we have various symptoms and we can feel very overwhelmed by all of these symptoms. And we tend to want to diagnose each of these symptoms. And we think, there's just so much wrong with me. Where do I even begin? Okay. We don't have to plug all the holes because it is an interconnected system. If we put one thing in place, it has a ripple effect on every other system. Okay. The way that we have been taught to think about our health is in terms of separate systems in silos. That's really not how the body works. And my study of the science of breath has really deepened my appreciation of this, how the body is really designed, the interconnectedness of all these systems, and all the structures that facilitate this connection. The vagus nerve system, for example, is this incredible network of nerve fibers that connects everything to everything and our energy centers. If we really circle the concentration of those nerve fibers of the vagus nerve, we will see that it corresponds quite strongly to the chakra system.
How interesting.
And so does the endocrine system. So we see how all of these systems are interconnected. When we study the body's fascial system, the connective tissue, This is this incredible network that surrounds every cell, every organ, every part of the body to work as a whole. Then we can wake up to the wonder of our bodies. Then we can wake up to how this incredible body has been designed for us to engage with, to co-create with. That's really empowering. And so when we can shift our relationship with our bodies, that there's always more right with us than wrong with us. Yeah. That our illness is the voice of health.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Our illness is the voice of health.
Let me expand. Let me give you a practical example.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know
what do I mean by that?
Yes.
Yeah, how can that even be?
Yes.
It feels like such a paradox.
Yes.
Let's think about a very simple example. So if we have a viral infection, for example, what happens is that the body will mount an immune response, and part of that immune response is often a high temperature. Okay, so we have a fever. So what do we do when we have a fever often?
Take a paracetamol.
Right. Not quite appreciating that that very fever is part of the immune system's way of dealing with that pathogen.
Okay, I got it, but I'd like you to continue.
Okay.
Yes.
So the symptom is the healing.
Oh my God, yes, you are right. Okay.
And when we can see our symptoms as the body trying to heal itself, the body trying to communicate something to us, how to engage with that in a way that supports that rather than suppresses it.
Yeah. I want to push back a little bit on that.
Yes.
Okay. Because, like, let's say I'm struggling with a high heart rate for a long time, or low blood pressure for a long time. It's just, that's how it is. My blood pressure drops, my heart rate goes up. So how is that my body healing? Because it's been going on for years and years. Why hasn't it healed? Why hasn't it stopped and normalized?
There are a few questions we can ask.
Okay.
Are we listening to what the body really wants? Are we giving the body the nutrients that it needs? Okay. So there are various tiers, right? Without judgment and with radical compassion for ourselves, what is the body communicating? What can I eat that will support my circulatory system? Okay. What can I use as medicine through food? What supplements could I take? Not to over-supplement. Okay. And this is often where we need guidance of a really skilled, wise practitioner. And perhaps we do need medication. So this is not to reject Western medicine. It has its place. And we are at a really exciting time now where modern technology and everything that we've learned through rigorous scientific research, what we understand about the body, can meet ancient wisdom. And through so many traditions, we have all of this available to us now. This is an exciting time.
That is beautifully explained and said. Yeah. I want to talk to you about actually two things, but I think I'll go with this one first. You've worked now for many years with people around their breathing and helping them heal through becoming aware of their breath. Do you have any interesting case studies so it could give people just some insight into what's possible?
Well, I love to tell the story of my colleague, Marge Murray, who's actually the MD of Breathwork Africa. Breathwork Africa, the organization that we founded. She runs it now. And she first came to me about 12 years ago. She won't mind me telling the story because she tells it all the time. Well, she came to me about 10 years ago with severe fatigue. She was feeling burnt out, and she came to me because she knew that I was working holistically and she wanted a series of vitamin B injections. And as I was listening to her, I just got the sense that she had been to therapy and she was using all these psychological terms. And actually, she felt a little over-therapized. And so I thought, I think she just needs to get into her body a little and needs to breathe. And I invited her to experience a breathwork session. And I thought, she would really do well with a series of sessions. And I'm not usually that pushy or prescriptive in my approach, but with her, I just felt that I needed to push her a little bit to commit to 10 sessions. And she pushed back, but eventually acquiesced. And she, at that time, was on beta blockers for anxiety, on antidepressants. And over time, and over a year or so, she completely came off them and no longer has any need for them. And she is one of the people that is really a testament to the power of breathing. I also just must say, in just saying that it's never just about the breath. The breath is part of a system that we are a part of. So perhaps as we start to engage with our breath, we realize that we need to move our bodies in a different way. And we are drawn to a particular style of exercise. Perhaps we realize that our diet needs to change. So breath in itself, the nature of breath is that it's not an isolated practice that can be taken out of context of the rest of our lives. Sometimes it just catalyzes us to take a next step towards something else completely. The breath is a catalyst. The breath is a medicine. The breath is a connector. The breath is an illuminator.
Yeah, because as you are becoming aware of your breath, you're also just, the nature of becoming aware of it is that you're becoming aware of your body. Then maybe the way that I imagine it is that maybe then I become more conscious of how foods are making me feel.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've found this myself in the foods that I eat. I mentioned to you that I quit sugar and I quit like a lot of things. Part of it was that I felt like I was reaching for things to regulate myself. But also as I started becoming a bit more aware, I've been meditating for just a couple of years now. But as I started becoming aware of my body and just like noticing, like, how do I feel if I like overindulge in whatever it is, whether it's scrolling, and it's just, it just doesn't feel good. And I think like the breath could be an extension of that, so you're not just, I've never become conscious of my breathing, but that's something that I'm going to start doing right away, which is like, what is my breathing telling me about my state of being?
Exactly. It's such a beautiful language.
It is a language. Now that leads me, I'm curious, okay? Because I love hacks. I know that's not how you operate, but I love hacks. Like if you meet somebody, are you able to tell their state of being just by observing their breath?
Yes.
Okay, tell us. How do we do this? I want to know. I want to know how to do it.
Well, I think it's not just about the breath. It's about the whole person. It's about the body language. It's about the way they're making eye contact. It's about those little nuances, about the posture, about their defensive kind of posturing and, there's the more subtle energy field. And so the speech is also a form of breath. So often I get a lot of information from the way someone speaks, the tone of their voice, where they're speaking from, how fast they're speaking, how slowly they are speaking. So speech as breath is one of the parameters of breath intelligence that I'm just tuned into.
Okay. So if someone's speaking very fast, that could indicate that they're feeling some kind of pressure?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah.
If somebody is like maybe speaking from up here, what would that... I mean, I'm just trying to think, as I do this, what do I feel?
Yeah. If there's like a defense pattern Or I don't want to be seen.
Yes.
What happens to my breath if I don't want to be seen? How does my breath reflect this need to be invisible? You know, it's kind of frozen.
Yes. And I feel like all this lock up. And then I'm only speaking from the upper part of my chest. If I'm identifying that correctly.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I see a lot of tension in the upper neck and the shoulders.
Yeah.
Perfectionism lives here. No judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, I know all of this because I know myself. Well, I'm starting to know. We never know of ourselves fully, but we keep unfolding our awareness of ourselves. So when I say these things, it's in no way judging anything, because we're all the same.
Yeah.
We all share common human things.
Yeah.
You know, we often think, it's only me, but it's actually not.
Yeah, no one else is struggling. It's just me.
Yeah. Everyone is struggling. I don't know a single human that isn't struggling. You know, I've been working with people for 30 years now. From CEOs to mothers to creatives to people that are seemingly incredibly confident and accomplished. I haven't come across anybody who does not feel in some way not good enough.
Yeah. A deeper question, right? Like, why is that? Why is that so ingrained in our being?
It's quite sad.
Yeah.
We've disconnected from our innate state of wholeness. It's part of just being human, right? It's just part of the humanness. I think, how do we relate to our humanness differently? It's not about kind of discarding or overcoming, getting rid of our very human feelings, patterns, habits. But how do we relate to it differently? And I think for me, that's what breathwork has helped me with. It's changed the place from which I'm relating to myself. So I'm less hard on myself. It doesn't mean I'm not committed to growth, but I can just see things from a different perspective, you know?
And as we become more aware of ourselves and connect to ourselves and have more compassion for ourselves, we perhaps have more compassion for others.
Absolutely.
I mean, I see that in myself, that as I uncover things within me, I notice people that I've been so upset with, and then I have so much more compassion for them.
Yeah.
And I mean, this somebody said to me that there's no forgiveness, there's only compassion. It becomes so easy. It's almost like there's nothing to forgive. I get it, you know. I mean, for whatever reason, that was your trajectory, and it led you down that path, and resulted in you behaving in certain ways.
Exactly.
And maybe I was lucky. I came across incredible people like yourself, and that, you know, that have changed my life, that have made me reflect. And maybe that person never had that opportunity. And
and I don't think that anybody intentionally goes out to hurt anybody else. I really don't believe that. You know, we say things, we do things from our own hurts, from our own defenses, from our own belief systems that are often unconscious.
do you think that our like state of lack, or like this state of being where we feel a lack in ourselves, do you think that this is kind of inbuilt in us to maybe make us move and search for something? Or do you think that our natural state is a state of wholeness, and actually our current system is causing us to feel this not good enoughness and this? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just wondering what do you think?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's both. I think our innate state of wholeness is there. I think it's the essence of who we are. I think the very nature of being human means that we are absorbed into the physicality which holds all of this not good enough stuff, which then we just build onto as we live our lives. And part of the human experience is to shift that and to find that place of wholeness again, from which we can relate to all those habits and patterns, and that all of those layers, in fact, as we work through them, contributes to our ever-expanding state of wholeness.
Yeah.
So we need it. It's the substrate that we need to feed this unfolding heart or soul, if you will.
Yeah. You mentioned like facilitating breathwork sessions in groups. So I'm curious to know that if each of us has a unique need in any given moment, how do you decide what to do for a group? Because surely each person in the group has different needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also, why I facilitate the way I do, which has changed over time because I've recognized this.
Okay, and how is that?
So the first thing I do is to try and establish a sense of groundedness within the body. So practices that invite embodiment, right? So I start off really slow, maybe with some movement, just allowing people just to arrive. And that may take some time to establish whatever safety means for that person, because that means different things to different people. But how can I, as a facilitator, do my best to ensure that this is a safe space for everybody? Everybody comes in with their beliefs, with their unconscious biases, with defenses. So in understanding that this is all in the room and that we are actually all constellating and holding something for each other, I use the words and the practices to create a field of safety. And then I start really slowly. And so the invitation in that initial phase is to get people really comfortable with what their breath is feeling like today and giving them permission to breathe in the way that feels free and open, that they have agency in their own breath, but at the same time, taking themselves to the edge of their comfort zone. So there's a difference between safety and comfort. So often we will stay with a pattern of breathing that is comfortable, familiar.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always allow us to play at the edge.
Yeah, okay.
So I facilitate in a way that gets people to feel where that edge is.
For themselves.
Amazing.
Okay.
So I don't often get people to breathe in the same rhythm. Even if I'm playing music that gets people to, energize their breath, to increase the pace, I never force people to breathe in a particular pattern because we are all unique. And so my approach is far more gentle, giving people permission to really sense their own breath and work with their own breath, while at the same time expanding. And often people are really surprised that the gentle approach can be as powerful, if not more so. Often I get people coming into a space that have experienced far more deep, with expanded states. And, they're used to that and they expect that kind of disembodied or almost expansive, altered state of consciousness. And I have intentionally pulled away from that approach because I believe that this process is slower. And it takes time to integrate it within the body, that this is an embodied practice. Yeah. And that actually the invitation is, how do we support this body to hold more of our consciousness? So that expanded state is not just something I experience in a group session every now and again, that I'm constantly working on this body so that it can hold more of an expanded state all the time.
Yeah.
That's what yoga has always been.
What you're saying is so interesting to me because you're so right. Because this has been my experience. I meditate and then I get into a great space and I feel like, I'm expanded and, I'm feeling all these great things. And then I go back into my day and then it's all gone. I want to move on to talk about specifically like these group sessions, and what comes to my mind is trauma and people that have experienced or are in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder, have experienced severe trauma. How did they respond to breathing? Because I know that sometimes, especially like the more hectic types of breathing, like the holotropic breath work, where it's really very engaged and active, can bring up a lot of emotions. And do you have a way to like specifically work with people that have experienced severe trauma?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about establishing safety.
Yes.
And balance within the nervous system, so that as we do start to pick up the pace, that we're not forcing the nervous system to deal with something it's not ready for. And often when we push people into very high energy breathing too soon, too quickly, too fast, then it overwhelms the body's nervous system, and people can, experience a re-traumatization.
Yes.
Without the integration.
It reminds me of like psychedelics, and people are like doing ayahuasca a lot, mushrooms.
Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks to the need for the quick fix. Yeah, we need to reestablish nature's pace.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about just like the neurobiology, because you're really into that, and you talk about it really well. Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's got a specific breathing technique. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. You breathe it down into your spine, and then you kind of create a pressurized system. And so you create pressure along your spine to push the breath up into your head, and then you release. Mm-hmm. And this is supposed to activate the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. What do you think about practices like this? Yeah. Can you explain like the difference between something that just neurobiologically, what you facilitate, or the types of breath you facilitate, versus these more popular forms of breathing, even the Wim Hof technique? Yeah.
My approach to breath is less about a particular technique, and it's more about a spectrum of practices. Yeah. So I like to think about my approach as a form of art, where we have these various practices. And by learning to feel into the body and what the body is asking for, we can draw on a particular practice that is appropriate for that time in a very gentle way. Now, a lot of these practices have been taken from very ancient technologies. They've been taken from ancient spiritual technologies that had context. Okay. That was supported by a lifestyle. It was supported by a particular way of moving the body. I think the risk of extracting a practice that was part of a tradition or a philosophy, a way of living or technology, and applying it in our current context, we need to be cautious about that. I'm not saying that there's no power in that or there isn't a role for that, but I think that we need to be aware that it's not just that practice. And if we do this practice, this is going to be the answer to whatever it is we're seeking,
Yes.
And again, it's a slow journey of creating these new neural pathways, of supporting the body's capacity to hold our expanded states of consciousness. We can't force ourselves into enlightenment. And enlightenment isn't even a destination. It's a temporary experience. We've all had expanded states, and then we return to our humanness, But how do we start to just shift the foundation from which we're living over time?
Could you describe how I would know that I'm feeling safe, and that I'm in this state that is like healing to my body? Like, how would that feel like? I know it's a very hard question probably, but is there some way that I could know that I guess I just want to know, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Is it working? Is this what it feels like? And for someone who has maybe been dysregulated for a long time, they may not even know what safety feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. How do we know that we're experiencing safety? A sense of being connected. Again, safety means different things to different people. I know I feel safest when I'm in my home and I'm with my dogs and I'm with my partner, and it just I feel comforted. I feel that my breath is flowing and easy. I feel connected to my body. I feel at ease. If I'm in a crowd of too many people and there are too many conversations, I can feel what happens to my body. I'm moving into a state of dysregulation. Even though my mind might perceive it as safe, I'm not perceiving it as unsafe, but my nervous system is telling me something else, and I can feel it with my sensations. I can feel it in my breath. So I think it's just getting curious. So I can be really relaxed and aware at the same time.
Okay.
Often when we feel really relaxed, we fall asleep.
Yeah.
So we're not conscious of that state of relaxation.
Yes.
So to cultivate the capacity to hold relaxation while in my conscious state is powerful. And that's why I love Yoga Nidra and non-sleep deep rest so much, is that it really, really supports us in doing that. And actually, all breathing practices, not all breathing practices, but the breathing practices that support the state of calm focus, that's, I think, what we are aiming to. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So is there anything that you see other breathwork practitioners doing that you perhaps wish they did differently? I ask because I noticed that your approach is quite unique compared to what I've experienced in like breathwork sessions.
I think it's really important for breathwork practitioners, wellness practitioners, any practitioner that is holding space for these expanded states to offer a sense of agency back to the person. There is a tendency to, even in these spaces, create a sense of hierarchy where I'm the person who is all-knowing, I'm the guru, I'm the teacher, and it creates this hierarchical system. It also tends to happen when someone is having an expanded state in the presence of this facilitator. We tend to project that experience onto that person or associate that feeling with that person and put that person on a pedestal. It's the guru complex. It's dangerous. Okay? We are moving away from the time of the guru. Okay? And the invitation is to find that teacher within. It's harder. It's far easier to give our power to a system, to a drug, to a pill, to a person, to an organization, to another system, whether that is a business system, a health system, a spiritual system, whatever that is. And so I'm not saying that we don't have a need for that. We can't operate in isolation. But if that system, person, technology, practice is not supporting you to tap into your own inner wisdom, to deepen that, to cultivate that.
Given that you're so into the science, where is the research frontier? And if you had an unlimited grant, which study would you run to settle maybe something that's being debated at the moment?
The impact of conscious breathing on the minds of children.
Okay. Tell us more.
I think we spend so much time undoing what society has done, what technology does, what just living in this current reality does, right? And what if conscious breathing was part of the curriculum, not just as a tool just not just as a technique that is done at the beginning of the day or before class, but that children learned about their bodies differently, learned about the diaphragm, learned about the wonders of this human form, and that engaged with the breath in that way. What impact would that have on their ability to self-regulate, and the ability to learn, on their creative capacity? That is what excites me most.
Have you been working with children?
At Breathwork Africa, we do. So Marge Murray mentioned earlier, specifically focuses on breathing with children. And yeah, it is our dream that we get some research funding to do this study, because I think that can have an impact globally.
What have you found while working with children?
They get it. They get breath because they are so close to their essence. They're so close to the natural state. There's not much we have to teach them. We just have fun with them. And naturally, they're drawn to it. It makes sense. And they teach their parents. And they can be the catalyst for the healing of the entire family.
You know that a lot of children are being diagnosed with ADHD, ADD. It's like a blanket diagnosis, I would say, for all kids, many kids. Could breath work help them?
Of course. Of course. The brain of a child, the developing brain of a child it's incredible. They're sparking up new neural pathways at an incredible rate. And when we are in a state of stress, our breathing pattern is really shallow. When we know mouth breathing, and we're carrying heavy bags to school, we're sitting behind our desks all day. What does that do to our breathing habit? When a child can learn to breathe more slowly, breathe through their noses, they cultivate their own breath intelligence, that supports the prefrontal cortex to learn better, to spark up those pathways. It dampens the activity of the amygdala, and it really increases their capacity to learn and develop.
And maybe a lot of the things that parents are struggling with, and even the children are struggling with, would possibly even just sort themselves out.
Yeah. We need our prefrontal cortex to learn.
Yes.
And so if that child, just because of the default dysfunctional or suboptimal breathing pattern, is activating their limbic brain and the amygdala constantly, it's impacting the capacity to learn, and we can absolutely shift that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I would think that I'd always thought that it would be so cool to get kids. My sister has 2 kids, and my niece and nephew I'm always trying to get them to meditate so hard. They're not going to do it. But this can change your life. Trust me. They're not buying it. But I think that breath is something that's much easier to grasp. And so that's fascinating. I'm definitely going to chat to them about it. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, for me too. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what I'm so passionate about.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Subscribing helps a new podcast like ours immensely. And until next time, don't be a sheep, keep questioning, stay curious, and never stop exploring the extraordinary.